Beginning the current Daf from Eruvin Daf, begin 5 lines down at the top of the Yomim. We're in the middle of a discussion regarding the story that happened with the waters of the Mila, the warm waters they wanted for the baby that spilled out, and then they were trying to figure out exactly what to do, how to get the warm waters. Our shiur corresponds to Cheskel to any time Daf Achaim. Appreciate was joining us for today's Daf. Some of the things we discussed in today's Daf are, it was clear in the Mavai where both Abai and Rabbi live that there was no Eruvin. That's the story from the previous Daf. Which that leads into the topic of Breira, of retroactive clarification. Then the Gemara brings 2 additional stories about babies whose hot water spilled on Shabbos, and the second story leads into a machlokes whether once a resident has been mevatel his reshus, which we've been speaking about. If someone did not join the Eruvin, mevatel his reshus, can other residents be mevatel reshus back to him? Could you give it be mevatel and then have it be mevatel back? And then the daf ends with a machlokes tanan regarding a tzeduki. Sadducee is someone who is a Jew, but he denies the oral law. Is he like a Jew that he can mevatel the reshus, or is he like a non-Jew and he cannot be mevatel the reshus? Some of the key terms and concepts are bereira, which retroactively becomes clarified that that's the way he was always meant to be, and therefore it retroactively has that status. Mevatel mevatel, which means to say that I can mevatel my reshus, and then they can be mevatel back to me on the same basis. Which means we don't make things like a joke. In halacha, we're concerned, even though something really is leaning like that halachically, we're not going to rule like that because we don't want it to seem like a joke. So, after the story on the previous daf, our Gemara continues regarding, we found that there was no air of Rashita for the mother where both Abai and Rabbi lived. There was hot water, there was the hot water for the baby spilled out. So he said, bring it from my house. He says, you can't bring it from my house, we didn't make an air, we didn't make a shiur. So ultimately he says, okay, let a non-Jew do it. As we said, that's what's called the shvus b'makam mitzvah. You can tell the non-Jew to bring it out to a place where just there's no air, which rabbinic was forbidden, because of the mitzvah milah that you need the hot waters for. Now that's what the Gemara continues, and Amalei Rabbi Barav Chan Labai, we're 5 lines down at the top of the Yomim of Samachetz Madal. So he said to Abaya, what Abaya was saying over this story, he says, I don't understand. Mavur de is betray Gavi Rabbi Karabanan. A mother in the alleyway, in a neighborhood, a cul-de-sac, which has 2 great rabbis as you, meaning you and Rabbi. You both live over there. If you're not going to have an Eruvin Chatzeres and not a Shetukim Avois, these are rabbinic injunctions. It was, and this is like, it's sugyas like this that show that the rabbis wanted Eruvin, they wanted Eruvin Chatzeres. So how could it be that you didn't have an Eruvin in the neighborhood that you live? So Amalei says, my Nevid, what should we do? Mar, the master, meaning Rabba Lavorche, it's not according to his honor that he should go collecting from the people in the alleyway to go collect. The Rav doesn't do such a job. So for him it's not appropriate. I know, Trid the Mikar says, me, I'm busy learning. In who? The rest of the people in the Mavai? They don't pay attention to it. So who's going to go ahead and collect it? Therefore there's no air, but there's no shita. Now, if you're going to say that I should go ahead and acquire to them from my own a pita besala, bread in the basket by just words, I could just say, when I have the bread in my basket, I could acquire to them, I could knock into them, rights in it, that could be part of a shituv mevois, where there's no tircha, and they're going to all have like rights in it for the purposes of shituv, but I can't do this as a buy. Why? Even the if one of the people are going to ask for me their piece of bread that they want to eat from the shituv, and they would request it from me, I'm not going to give it to them. I don't have that much bread for all the people in the neighborhood to give them a bona fide portion. What would happen is batal shituv. The whole shituv would be undone because the Tanya learned the brayso, the following interesting halacha. If one of the people in the mavai, if he requests his wine and oil from the shituv, and he doesn't get his portion, but the shituv is undone. And Taisa actually brings interestingly that a person has to be careful when he makes an erev. Don't make it with something that you're particular, that you prepared for Shabbos, or the challah, or the pashtida, which is a type of like a knish they used to have. Because if someone's going to ask him, you're not going to give it to him, it's going to be batal erev. He has to be able to give it to him. He says, I can't afford to give a piece of bread if people in the neighborhood come and ask me on Shabbos. He says, I want my part of the shituv. I wouldn't be able to, so I can't be mocked into that piece of bread. So on that, he asked him, Rabbi Baruch asked Abaye, why doesn't you, the master Abaye, go and be makna to them, reveal us to the challah, or just a quarter of a loig of vinegar, which that is the amount of vinegar that you need for 2 meals worth of dipping. Now the halach is, as we'll see later on this Masechta, that for the Eruvin Chatzeres, it's enough for 2 meals worth for everyone in the whole neighborhood. So all you have to do is be makna to them a revius of chaymetz, and that would be enough. A bechavita in one of your barrels, which there's some words missing according to some of Farshim, because a quarter of a revius of vinegar, that he could, and he could afford that. But there's a concern that if he's just going to have a revius of like, it might get consumed. So essentially what the Gemara is then assuming that, okay, so no, just leave it in one of your barrels and you'll consume it. There will always be a revius of vinegar, that will be the sheet of vinegar. And that's something that it's not going to be costing you much. It's just a revius of like a vinegar. And Rashi points out the primary shiur from the voice is with wine, as the Gemara says later on the parak of Ayin Aleph on the base. So you'll just leave the barrel in the courtyard and rely on the revius that's inside of it for the purposes of shiur for the whole year. And because you leave the shituf mavayis in the chutzner, the Eruvin Daf is leaving one of the houses in the courtyard. Shituf mavayis, you leave one of the courtyards in that whole mavay. So that's it. What's the big deal? Take one of your barrels that you have, put it into the courtyard, and leave it there. And there's a revius of like that will work for everybody. And that says Abai, no, Tanya lit the brisa that ein mishtatrin ba'itzer. You can't go ahead and create a shituf with something that's stored away, meaning like a barrel of wine or produce that's gathered together. You cannot rely on what's inside of it because of the halachic concept of there's no breira. Which one is that of shituf? So anytime you're going to use the barrel, you're going to take a little bit of vinegar, that might be the shituf vinegar. We don't know. So you can't use something which is like that you keep in your pantry, something that's like a oitzer type of a thing, and use it because that might be it. So therefore says Abaya, I had no choice. Again, Rabbah is beneath his dignity. Abaya, I'm too busy learning. Everyone else, they don't care to do it. I couldn't be making the bread to them because Abaya was too poor. And the people are going to ask for it, he's not going to be able to. And he says, and what's with going out and giving them a revius of logo vinegar? He says, I can't. It's not clearly designated. And the food taken out of the storage and eaten might be the Erev, nullifying the Erev. So that's why there was no Erev, no shituf in our neighborhood. But then the Gemara asks, wait a second, there's a conflicting brisa. But Tanya mishtat, but we learned in the brisa that actually even that of Eitzer, you could go ahead and make a shituf of mavais with a barrel that you keep for long periods, like that of in the storage type of a barrel that has a lot of wine or vinegar. You could use it. Rabbi Yishi says like it's not difficult because Habesham Beis. It's actually a machlekes Beisham Beis regarding the halacha of breira. And that's going to be the machlekes that we find over here. If you could use it, the oitzer for shituf mavayis, and it's not. We found such a precedent as machlekes b'sham b'sil and Mishnah b'seilas olas. The Mishnah says again, classic Talmudic style. We're going to introduce a not related to this topic Mishnah, but the concept, the way the Gemara is going to explain it, is that the machlekes regarding yesh breira or ain't breira, and that's going to be the same machlekes regarding if you could be mishtat and ba'itzer or not. Mishnah says hameis b'bayis. There's a dead person in the house. There's many entryways into that house. So Kulan, all the vessels that are in any of the doorways, they're all going to be Tmein. Now, even though that's not really technically part of the Oilam mess, the reason is because we don't know which entryway you're going to take out the dead body from. Now, the entryway that you're going to end up taking out the dead body becomes tummy right away. Now, Rashi points out that it's not from logic. This halachas of Tumah are halacha leishon Sinai. Now, this would even apply by windows, that even a tefach square, they can become tummy because we consider all these entryways as closed, and we don't know which one is going to take it out. So we have to assume, or we have to suspect, that all of them are going to be the one, and therefore they're all going to be tummy. But let's say niftach echad mehen, let's say one of the doorways are open, and that's the one that for sure you're going to take out the dead body from. Oh, so then who tummy b'kulin time? So then that one's going to be tummy, and all the other ones are going to be tummy. Now, let's say let's say you didn't even open up one of the doorways. You only thought that you're going to take out the dead body from one of the entryways. Let's say it's not even an entryway, but it's a window that's at least 4 tvachim squared, because the Rashi explains that less than 4 tvachim squared is not significant enough to save the rest, as if this is the entryway in contrast to the other ones. So if you even think about it, that will also be masal kol pesachim kum. That will also save regarding all the other entryways. Now, this one, however, has a machlekes b'sham b'sil. B'shami Ayman, they say this, that you even just think about which entry you're going to take him out from is only it's only if you thought about it, which one you want to take him out from, because he's going to sing over here, he's on his last breath, is only if he didn't die yet. Then, if he didn't die yet and you thought I wanted to take him out of that doorway, so there was never any tumah that took effect on the other entryways. But if he already died, so all the kelim already became tummy. So then we don't say it was retroactively verified that originally I had my intention that I wanted to take him out from that entryway. No, you didn't think about it before he died, and therefore tumah took effect And therefore, even the Kalim, Rashi explains, that come after you already thought about it, are going to be tummy. Because since their entryway has already halacha tumah, you can't remove it anymore with just machshava until you do an actual action, that you open up one of the doors. Then that's going to help and be effective to purify the other ones from here on on. What's called mekan laba, as the Mishnah itself said. If one of them will open up, then it's going to go ahead and say this is the one in contrast to the other ones. So we see Beis Shammai holds that just like the opinion that says ein mishtatfin ba'itzer. Why? What's the halacha of ein mishtatfin ba'itzer? Why can't you use the storage as? Because you don't know which quarter leg of vinegar is coming out when you're using it. It might be that one. And we don't say, oh no, Brera, that must be the one you're leaving over is the one of these shitas, because who said? Here also, Beis Shammai says, you don't say Brera. You don't say, oh, must have been, that was the one that I wanted to take him out. Different other ones I don't. No, it's not true. Whereas the Beis Hillel and the Beis Hillel say, af mishiyam SMS. They say, no, even if the person had already died. And only after he died, 10 minutes later, you say, oh man, the person died, now all the kalim and all the thing, I want to take him out from there. Just thinking about it, you're going to say yesh brera. You're going to say that must have been yesterday, that was his intention to take him out of that entryway, and that means to say there was never any tumah that took effect on any of the other entryways, and even the vessels that were there before you thought about it are going to be tahar because of yesh brera.
So during 10 minutes, they tumah, and then they become tahar.
Exactly, that's what yesh brera is. Retroactively, it's verified that that was never the one I was going to take him out from, and this was the one I was going to take him out from, and therefore you could. That's the opinion holds that mishtatfin ba'itzer, that you could use it because every time you take, it's nizbarer that that's not the shituv one, because the shituv one you're leaving over, and therefore the machlekes that we have, if you mishtatfin ba'itzer or not, is the machlekes b'sham asil, if you say yesh brera or not. Which place obviously points out that that's difficult in Abaya, who says the reason why I didn't do shituv with the revius of the vinegar is because who said you might say you say imish natam ba'itzer, but wait a second, that's Beis Shammai. We don't really Beis Shammai discusses that. He said that you'll have to explain machlokes Beis Shammai differently.
So
but that's
back on the other. So the kalim that you go through the tummy door that later becomes Torah. What's the din of those kalim?
If there was let's say 10 entryways, and entryway number 1 he decides 10 minutes after the person passed away that that's the one I want to take him out from. So then retroactively, entryway number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, they're all tahar.
So the but the kalim when they went in when it was still tummy. Also we're saying that retroactively they're Torah, so
Yeah.
the kalim are Torah.
Yeah, exactly. That's the halacha of yesh brera. So that was the end of that story that we started in the previous daf regarding a baby that the hot water had spilled out, and the reason why we're bringing this up is because they're related to halachas of Eruvin Daf from the place. The Gemara continues with other stories regarding the hot water of the baby for the bris milah that spilled out, also related to this theme of Eruvin Daf and Shatu from the place. Says the Gemara, hu yenuka, again a baby, the infant, the ishtabach chamimah, that the hot water for the breast that you need for the baby spilled out. So Rabbi said to them, look, ask the mother if she needs the hot water, and then then let a non-Jew heat up the water for the mother. Because Rashi brings the Gemara tells us elsewhere, Masechta Shabbos, that a woman who gave birth, after 7 days after birth, even if she says, you're not machal Shabbos, but you do it al day on Nachri up until day 30. So since she's still, when by the bris milah it's after 7 days, it's before 30, then you do a malacha through a nachri. So what do you do for the baby? Ask the mother. If the mother needs it, you'll be able to warm it up through a nachri. So Rabbi says, what do you mean? Tamri. The mother's eating dates. In other words, we see that she obviously does not need hot water to drink because she's even eating something that cools her off, like dates. So Amalei says, not true. You could say, Tunva ba'amahu denaketla. Like she's eating, she doesn't know what she's eating because an element of she's dysregulated, and therefore what? Stupor. Okay, like Rashi says ashtorshin, whichever word works for you. But basically, it's like she doesn't realize, and that doesn't mean because she's doing this that's a sign that she doesn't need it. Could be she really does need it, and therefore you can warm it up for the mother and then use it for the baby.
And she doesn't.
What?
She doesn't need water.
Then you can't. Then that's what he's saying, that you can't. For the mother, you have a heter of a milakim. The Gemara brings another story. Ahuyanuka, what?
You can't make the bris.
After the bris, you can make the water now.
Saying it was going to be sakana, this and that, whatever it is. So it says the Gemara, and Tais says he explains it in Seftas Gittin regarding this story. So then now the Gemara brings another case. So there was this infant that the hot water spilled out. Now, Rashi explains that this was in the courtyard of Rava. In the courtyard, if you see that some Rashis have this picture, in the courtyard of Rava, they had hot water. Now, the child's hot water spilled out in another courtyard, and there was an opening between the two courtyards. Now, the thing is that the two courtyards did not have an Eruvin. Now, Rava had in his house, which opened up into his courtyard, as you see in the picture, inner chambers, which did not open up directly to the courtyard, and that was for modesty, and that's where the women would sit. Now, the men would sit in the opening into the house part that opened up into the courtyard. So like you see in the picture, you see all the way to the right is Bein Nashi, where the women would be there, the more modest place, and that opened up into the Bein Gavri, where the men would be, and that opened up into the Chatzar, where the Chama was, and there's an opening to that into the other Chatzar, where in that Chatzar was where there was the Baya Shalkan. Nice picture. Now, we learn the Mishnah later on, that if someone's mavatul his rishus in his courtyard, I mean he gives up his rights in his courtyard, he's not allowed to carry out from his house to the courtyard, because it's not his courtyard. And that would be nullifying his rights that he gave up, meaning he would be taking it back. So therefore, Amlu Rava said to them, Panali mani mi beigari lebeinashi. Take my vessels, whatever I need for Shabbos, from the beigari, which is where the men are, so that I shouldn't come to take them from that house to the chutzner, which is right there, a stone's throw away. And then I'll go into the inner chambers, where the women usually are, and then I'll nullify my rights into the courtyard to the people of the other courtyard, and then they'll come to take the hot water from my courtyard to their courtyard. Yeah? Good idea, right? So on that, Amalei Ravin l'Rava. Ravin said to Rava, how can you say that? But the Amar Shmuel, we said this on the previous Daf, and some of them the Beis. Shmuel said, you're not allowed to nullify rights from one chatzar to another chatzar. Here, you're trying to give up your rights to the neighboring chatzar, that they can take the hot water from your chatzar to their chatzar, so that they have no problem by carrying, because you have no rights. It's just like one big rishus for them. Now they nullify rights from one to another. Amalei said to him, I'm not Rabbi Yechanan really. He says, what do you mean? I hold like Rabbi Yechanan that the Amar Yesh Bitul Rishus Mochas L'Chatzar, as we brought this machlekes over there. He holds you could nullify rights from one quarter to another, and therefore that's what I could do. However, on that they asked him, Ravina said, but if the master does not hold like Shmuel, as you can see them in days, so then they said, let the master stay in his place. In other words, from the fact that you said, money, take out all my stuff that I need, all my svarim, all my stuff I need for Shabbos, and bring it into the chambers. So Ravina is telling Rav that you revealed your intention, that obviously once you mavatl your rights over here in the chutzner, because you need to give it up so that they can take that water, that you have no more rights anymore in the chutzner for the rest of Shabbos. That's like Shmuel, who says later on, as we're going to quote on this, Amid, you can't nullify your rights and then nullify back to you. Because if you don't hold like Shmuel, so what do you mean, stay where you are? Then temporarily nullify your rights in the chutzner just for a few moments until they take the hot water. And then let them go ahead and revert and nullify back to you, and then you'll have your chutzner right back, and you're able to do whatever you need. So why are you saying, I'll clear my stuff out? It's just a few minutes. Nullify your rights, let them take that water, and let them nullify back to you. Because the Amar Rav, because Rav had said, who's that with the dispute Shmuel? He says, he says you could nullify your rights, and then they could go ahead and nullify back to you. So when you have two people living in a courtyard and they did not make an Eruv, it's okay. One guy could give his rights to the other one until he does what he has to. Another guy could nullify back to him and let him do what he has to do in the chutzner. So why are you clearing out all your stuff? Obviously, you're telling me that you don't hold like Shmuel. Then if that's the case, if you don't hold like Shmuel, then why do you have to clear out your stuff? So it says, I know, but Shmuel's really in this halacha of chayz mevatlin, that I hold like Shmuel, he says that you cannot give up your rights and have them give it back to you again. But I do hold not like him in the other halacha, mechatz l'chatzah. That you could be mevatlin mechatz l'chatzah. So it's very important to understand this point that the Gemara is saying, because the Gemara is going to ask it as a question. We have two machlekes that Shmuel has. Rabbi says in regards to that ein bittul rishus mechatz l'chatzah, that he also could be that you could mevat rishus to nazar chatzah. That's the difference. Able to give up his rights to them to get that water. The other machlekes is Rabbi and Shmuel that the Gemara is going to elaborate shortly. If you could nullify and then go back and nullify again, that he does not hold like Rabbi. He holds yes like that, like a Shmuel. The other party cannot mevat back to him, and therefore he said I had to clear out my stuff and bring it into the inner chambers because for the rest of the Shabbos, I had to give it up. On that, the Gemara says, wait a second, how could you say in one you're like Shmuel, the other one you're not like Shmuel? Isn't it all the same logic, the same reasoning? My time, why is it that Shmuel holds that you can't give up your rights and then them go ahead and give it right back to you? Lav Mishum, isn't it because the Kivim, the Batla Mishum say the moment you give up your rights in the courtyard, is stalically mahachal gamri. It's like you're not here anymore. And therefore what? You like live in another courtyard. Huh? If you live in another courtyard, that's where the whole basis of the halacha of because then you like live in another courtyard and you cannot move from one courtyard to another one. If that's the case, if you agree to the logic of you by default hold that you cannot move out from because that's where the whole yesod of the halacha is from is based on the premise that then you like live in another courtyard, and that's why we can't let them be mavatla to you because you cannot be mavatla. So how can you say in regards to that you do hold that like Rabbi Yechon mavatla? To which he answered no. Hasam over there that you cannot be chayz mavatla is not because you're like in another courtyard and you cannot mavatla v'chatz lachatz. The reason is because we don't want rabbinic law to be kechucha, like a joke, vitlula, and some type of like scorn. Which is that if we're going to let you, you go use it, and winter weapons. Now I go use it, and you go use it, and it's just like a joke. What I mean, you tell me you guys don't share the whole neighborhood together? Like, okay, now it's my turn, now it's your turn. That's why you can have mavatl. But the truth is, even if you live in another chutzner, you could be mavatl mechatz l'chutzner, and therefore it's not a contradiction how that in this halacha he holds that yesh betel rishus mechatz l'chutzner, but in this he could still hold like Shmuel the mavatl mechatz mavatl. Now, Gufa, the Gemara goes back to explain this machlekes of Rav and Shmuel. Rav mavatl mechatz mavatl, you could nullify your rights, and then they could nullify it back to you. The Shmuel he says no mavatl mechatz mavatl, you cannot mavatl mechatz mavatl. Says the Gemara, Lema Rabbi Shmuel, let's say this machlekes of Rabbi Shmuel is bepluked the Rabban and Rabbi Eliezer Kamaflik, which is the Rav, the Amak Rabban, and Rav says like Rabban, who the Mishnah brings later on the next dot, that when someone's mavatl his rights in the chutzner, his house is forbidden for him and for them to carry out and into. Why? Because we say that when someone gives up his rights in the courtyard, he did not give up the rights in his house. So therefore, his house is one entity, and the courtyard is another entity. So obviously, and therefore no one could carry out of his house, because his house was not in his battle too. Although he gave up the rights in the courtyard, so now everyone could carry in the courtyard who did the Eruvin, he's the only one that didn't. But his house is still his own private house. So we see that he's not totally removed when he's mevatel his rights in the chutzner. So he's not like keben chutzah acheres. It's not like he's living in another courtyard. He still lives over here. So therefore, the halacha would be that you could be chayz mevatel, like Rav said. Rav's like Drabanan because he's still here. He's not like in another chutzner. Shmuel dam Rabbi Eliezer. Shmuel, however, would hold like Rabbi Eliezer that the Gemara brought in Daf Yomi that when someone gives up his rights in the chutzner because he forgot to join the Eruv, and he's mevatel's rights, his house is permitted for them to carry into and out of. Why? Because once he gave up his rights in the courtyard, he gave up the rights in his own house too, and it's like part of the general communal area. So you see, he's like he doesn't even live over here. He gave up everything. It's like he lives in another courtyard. That would be like Shmuel, who would hold because you live like in another courtyard, which is essentially like the Gemara was saying in the Havman. To which Rav, no, each Amar would tell you that no, he could be like both Tanai. Rav would tell you, I could even be like Rabbi Eliezer. Why? Where do we find Rabbi Eliezer over there that he says if someone gives up his rights in the courtyard, and again he has to do because he's the only guy who didn't join the Eruv. Rishus Beis Beitl, he's also giving up his rights in his house. Oh, that's Mishum de Babais because living in a house without a courtyard, like Darianchi, people don't live. And therefore we presume and we take for granted that you're giving up the rights to your house too. That's only because of presumption. Avlein is taluke, but regarding to remove you as if you live in another courtyard, which then you cannot go ahead and get back your properties. Miyama, did he say that? He never said that. He just says that you're not living in the house. But who says like you're living in another courtyard? And since you're still in this courtyard, you could say like Rav that chayz mavat. He would say, I'm not damar for the Rabban, so that could even be like Rabban. Ad kem lekam Rabban Hasan. Where do we find Rabban? They say over there that Elamaida bottle, what you nullified, which was your rights in the court, that you gave up. With the light bottle, what you didn't give up, you didn't give up. Your house is still going to be yours, and different people cannot carry in and out of your house. Elamaida bottle, what you did give up from the court that you explicitly said you're giving up your rights. That for sure you're totally removed from. And therefore you don't live in this chatzar, you live in another chatzar. And since you live in another chatzar, is ein chayz mavatlim, because you're like a ben chatzar acher. So therefore each Amar could say that he's like both Tanoi. However, the Gemara says, Amar Rav Acha bar Chana Rav Sheshes. He says, no, it is Ketanoi, like a machlekes Tanoi in the Mishnah later on. Mishnah next daf says like this. Mishnah nasan reshusay. If someone gave his rights to the people of the courtyard, because again, he forgot. He's the one guy, everyone in the developments put in the area, he's the one guy that did it. So he's ruining it for everyone. So he's going to, I'm about my rights. I have no rights in the Chatzah for Shabbos. Now after he nullified his rights, then on Shabbos, guess what? He carries out of his house to the courtyard. If he's doing that, he's reasserting obviously his rights to use the courtyard. So this machlek is exactly the parameters of this halacha. And we'll see this on the next step. But our Gemara is bringing it in to show that this is machlek is Rav and Shmuel. So if he carries out to the courtyard on Shabbos, whether by mistake or whether intentionally, Isser is going to make the whole chutzner forbidden for everyone else because he's retaking his rights in the courtyard, and therefore it's not batal, and therefore it's not a valid heir. That they remain. Yehuda says no, but Mezer Isser, if he does it deliberately, it's going to be a problem. But b'shaking in Isser, if he does it by mistake, it's not going to be a problem. Says the Gemara, my lab b'hakim nefagi. Isn't this what they're disagreeing about? The Marsa Meir holds that yes, even if he does it by mistake, he's retaking his rights because he holds mevatlim. He holds that the fact that you mevatl, that doesn't stop you from them, let's say, re-mevatl to you. I mean, you're not totally removed, and therefore, when you go back in, you're taking it back. That's the same thing regarding bittul, that you could say chayz mevatl and you could take it back. Whereas Amarsa, Rabbi Yehuda holds that no, you cannot go ahead and mevatl and then go ahead and have them re-mevatl back to you. So like some Girsais have in the Gemara, so Rav's like a mayor and Shmuel's like a Yehuda. So because that's what you're saying. Because if we're focusing on the Shegi halacha, Mezid, as we're going to shortly explain, is different. But the point is, when you're going back in, who are you? If you're a member of the courtyard, so then that's chayz mevatlin, and that's the same thing over here. You're going to be retaking your domain over here in the chatzar. If you're not, so then you're not getting it back. That would be the same opinion that would hold emavat chayz mevatlin. So Rav Acha bar Tachlit Mishmei says no, not necessarily. The Kuliyam, I can tell that everyone holds imavat chayz mevatlin. It's not necessarily that the machlek is the machlek is Rav and Shmuel. I can say that actually everyone holds like Shmuel that you cannot mevatl and chayzer mevatl. And the reason is because you're totally removed. And yes, the truth is, if that's the case, then when you go by mistake back into the courtyard, you, the guy who's mevatl, it should not come back to you because you're not even like here. They cannot even mevatl you. However, Bahach over here becomes to show you got the basic penalty. Here we're talking about regarding, and Taisa says not really a penalty, it's really more like a concern of the case of when you do by mistake, in concern that you might come to do it in the case of deliberate, which is, as the Gemara explains. Marsa May holds, comes to show you the Mason. We're concerned when you do it even by mistake of the case that you might come to do it deliberately. Whereas a Marsa Rabbi Yehuda holds that no, so but like comes to show you the Mason, we don't penalize the case of by mistake because the case you do it deliberately. As Rashi explained, when the guy does it deliberately, everyone agrees that even though even if you say he's totally masulik, as if he's not here anymore, but since he's taking it back and he's doing it deliberately, he takes it back because he didn't sell his rights, he's just mavatl rights. So he can take it back. And as Rashi points out, we're talking about where the people in the Mavai did not yet take possession of the Mavai after he nullified it before he backs out, which we'll see this later on the next Daf, this concept about who did it first, who asserted their rights first. But if the people in Mavai did not assert their rights and he goes and takes it back, heaven agrees if he does it deliberately, he's going to take it back. The whole thing is when he does it by mistake, so that's not because they're disagreeing regarding if he's, let's say, nostalgic or not nostalgic. It's not the machlekes Rav and Shmuel of mavatl chayz mevatlin, which is this idea: are you here or are you not here? If you're here, then we could mavatl back. If you're not here, because like your chatzah chez we cannot be. No, it's just simply: are we concerned for the case of shaking because of the case of Mazid? Because the case of Mazid would be even if you're masul legami, you're taking back. You never sold it. But the It's a shaky. Again, there's a different machlek. It's not the machlek is Rabbi Shmuel. It could be everyone holds that aim of Akmach is Mavatan, and the concern is simply of shaky or the mezid. However, Rashi, he says, no, it's like we said before. He says, Rabbi Shmuel is bepluked to Belazar Rabbanan. This is exactly the machlekes Rabbi Belazar Rabbanan. If, what we said before, if the halach is going to be, when you mevatel your shus in the chatzar, if people could carry it out of your house on Shabbos or not, which is obviously that he's interpreting, that means to say that like you're totally not here in another chatzar, that is where the machlekes Rabbi Shmuel comes from. It's the same machlekes regarding if we consider you here or not. Now we continue the halacha of our Mishnah. We said that Amr Mimlil, he says, Maisa b'tzeduki yachad. He says, there's a story with a tzeduki, who again, like we said, is someone who claims he doesn't believe in the oral law, who has a questionable status regarding his Yehudis, Shahayad Darimam. So he lived with us, and he was Mavatal his Rishus in the Chatzah. So the Gemara brings like this: Tzeduki man dekar shmei. We didn't live come saying a story with a Tzeduki. Did the Tanakhama say anything about your necessity of renting the rights from the Tzeduki? The Gemara is coming to disagree and says that you can move out because what we talk about in our Mishnah, Hadar, this parak opened up if someone's living with a non-Jew. So he said, oh, that's different like everything else we spoke about until now. So all the time we talk about living with Jews. So then you just do an Erev. With a Nachri, so we have a machlekes regarding if it's one Jew living with a Nachri or two Jews living with a Nachri, then you got to rent the rights. And then suddenly out of nowhere, Lil says, oh, there was a story with a Tzeduki. Who are you talking about? And the Tzeduki, we were saying that, oh, you could be Mavatal. He was Mavatal his Rishus. And so the Tanakhama says you cannot be. So the Gemara says, yes, there's words missing from my Mishnah, and this is what it's supposed to say. Tzeduki, the Tanakhama holds a Kanachi. He's like a non-Jew, where he cannot be Mavatal his Rishus without renting. You have to rent it from him. A non-Jew can't be Mavatal his Rishus. That's something a Yisrael could do. Yisrael can make an Erev, and if it gets, he can be Mavatal. The Nachi, you have to rent it. The Tanakhama go hold the Tzeduki for all practical purposes, it's like a Nachi. For Le'olayim, that's what Le'olayim is coming to say, Tzeduki ain't a Kanachi. No, the Tzeduki is not like a non-Jew. He's a Yisrael. He just denies the oral law, but he's still a Jew. And that's what Rabbi that's where he comes. Rabbi comes to say, Ma'aseh b'Tzeduki echad she'darim man b'mam b'Yerushalayim. There was a story with a Tzeduki who lived with us in the same alleyway in Yerushalayim. V'amlam Abba and our father said to us, Ma'aru v'yitziu es hakelim l'mavoi. Quickly, take out your vessels to the mavoi and essentially take possession of the mavoi until he doesn't quickly do it before you and get his stuff out into the mavoi and then make it forbidden for you, because once you take possession, he cannot go ahead and then undo the bittul. As Rashi explained, we're talking about that Ramliel's father had told him to do it once Shabbos started, because to do chazakah from before Shabbos does not show anything. But if you quickly do it the moment Shabbos starts, you took possession, now he can't go ahead and retake possession. It says the Gemara Tanya, that's what we learn in the Brisa, that yes, the Rabbanan disagree in this halacha, the Tzeduki. Hadar and Nachri Tzeduki Besusi. We see the Tanakhama put together the Tzeduki and Besusi, which is also the Beisusim were a similar type of a sect that were part of this, that they deny the oral law. That the Tanakhama is putting them together with a Nachri. They make it forbidden for the Jew to make an Erev until you go ahead and you rent from him the rights, which is like the Nachri, how the Tanakhama holds.
Those were halachic statuses, Tzeduki and Besusi. They were given halachic status, like that they were branded as such, and then
For this halacha, the Tanakhama holds that we treat them as a Nachri. We don't, because the whole purpose is Shalayim and Ma'aseh. The whole thing was we don't want them to learn from them, and the Tzeduki Besusi are also going to obviously be bad influences. So for sure, in regards to that, we treat them like a Nachri according to Tanakhama. Yomei says no, Tzeduki Besusi in a nicer. Tzeduki Besusi, they don't make it forbidden that you have to rent from them, and that's where the Ma'aseh b'Tzeduki echad she'darim ein Ramliel, the Ma'aseh Yisrael, there was this Tzeduki that lived with Ramliel in the same Mavi Yerushalayim. Ramliel said to his sons, Bana, my sons, Maharu, quickly, Maitziu, Mashat, Maitzian, take out what you need to take out. Bring in what you need to bring in until this abominable person doesn't go ahead and take out his vessels into the mother, because then he's going to go ahead and take back his rights. He's going to make it forbidden for you because he nullified his rights to you. That's the remez. So quickly chap around and take possession so that he doesn't undo it. Yehuda said it in a different, he quoted the story in a different version. Quickly go do what you need to do in the alleyway before Shabbos. Actually, until it doesn't become already dark. and he's going to make it forbidden on you. As Rashi explains, Rabbi Yehuda holds that Gamliel actually didn't disagree with the Tanna Kama. He agrees that Tzeduki is like a Nachi, and therefore his bittul doesn't help. It's not going to help once it becomes Shabbos. Which that the Gemara is going to ask in the next daf. What do you mean? We learned in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda says clearly that do what you need to do ad shelo yotzi until that, not until Shabbos, until that Tzeduki doesn't at some point in Shabbos take out his stuff, which obviously according to Rabbi Yehuda, according to Gamliel, he could be mevatel. The only thing that Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with Rabbi's version is that he holds that even after the Yisraelim take possession, he could back out and he could retract and renege on that. But it's not like that you have to do what you need to do before Shabbos. You could do it until any point in Shabbos, until he goes and takes his stuff. That the Gemara is going to discuss on the next daf. Something that we discussed in today's daf, in Eruvin Daf Samach Ches, was why wasn't that story of the child through the infant that the hot water spilled out, that there was no Eruv or Shituf? Why was there no Eruv or Shituf? So Abai says, Rabba, it's beneath his dignity, the Rav, to go ahead and start collecting from everyone the Eruv. Abai says, I was busy learning. And the rest of them, they don't pay attention. Now, what about taking bread from his basket? You could be mazaka to them in your bread baskets. Abai was poor. He says, I don't have. If they're going to try to collect bread from me, and I'm not going to give them, it's going to undo the whole sheet of mavait. So what about just a revius of vinegar? That's enough for the meal. You don't have to have that amount of food. It has to be enough that you could use the 2 meals worth. For the whole Eruvin Chatzeris, for everyone, so that's enough. He says no, because you cannot be ma'arim ba'etzer. And this is something that you store away, and it's like a big barrel, and you just continuously use it. You can't. Now why? Because of Ein Breira. Because we don't know which is going to be that first review that you took already might have been the air, and boom, it's out the window. Now some want to say that that's a machlekes, and the reason why I said some, because Taisi explains that the Abai would have to say it's not, but that this is a machlekes b'Shabbos Hill, where we have one brayso that says you could use an eitzah fish to voice, the other one says you can't. So machlekes b'Shabbos Hill, if you say the halacha breira, and where do we find the machlekes b'Shabbos Hill? The halacha of tumah. When someone has a machshava regarding which doorway he wants to use, there was a machlekes b'Shabbos Hill if it has to be, or if it could be, if it has to be until he didn't die yet. B'Shammai says it has to be, and Beisil says it doesn't have to be, and therefore that what's the machlekes? Beisil holds, yeah, because it's retroactively going to be verified that wasn't the one, and therefore it's going to be Torah even afterwards. B'Shammai holds it has to be before he dies. Afterwards, already too late. So that's machlekes b'Shabbos Hill. If you hold yesh prayer or not, that's the machlekes we have away regarding if you could be mashtat from ba'itzer or not. We went to another story with a child that the hot water spilled out, where Rava says, okay, look, take my vessels, clear it out from the outer chambers, what's called the Begavi, to the Begashi, to the Vaib that was open in the Koch, that's in the inner rooms. Take my stuff out from there into the inner ones. And then I'll give up my rights in the Chatz, and they'll take the hot water from my portrait to their portrait. So the Gemara says, obviously he holds like a B'yechina, who holds that you can evaporate from one Chatzar to another Chatzar. But at the same time, he holds like Shmuel, even though he disagrees with Shmuel in that halacha, he holds like Shmuel, that ein mevatlan v'chayzin mevatl. You can't go out and mevatl and then have them mevatl back, because if you did, then why are you leaving? Why are you saying pack up my stuff and pack up your stuff? Haltzachana puminid, they're going to take the stuff and then you'll mevatl back to you. No, that he doesn't know. That he holds like Shmuel that you can have mevatl chayzin mevatl. So wait a second. The Gemara says, isn't that same reasoning? Isn't the whole yesod of why ein mevatl chayzin mevatl is because once you mevatl, it's like you're not here anymore. It's like you're another chatzah, and you cannot mevatl chatzah. How can you hold yes? But says no, it's not true. It's not the same reason. The only reason why Shmuel holds, which Rav says he holds like that because it's like a joke. It's like chulcha b'tlura. But it's mine, it's yours, it's yours, it's mine, it's mine, it's yours. So that's why. But the truth is, he can still hold that mevad mechatz l'chatz, it's not a joke. It's just from one domain to another one, and that's why that's the explanation of that story. So then, once we brought that in, we had a machlekes Rabbi Shmuel from that story. If you can mevat l'chayzim mevat, and the Gemara wanted to say 2 times as machlekes to them, and the Gemara says not necessarily. Not necessarily machlekes Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbanan regarding when you mevatel your rishus in the chutz, if that inherently includes the bittul of your house, which essentially that's the yesod of as if you're not here anymore. So that's the yesod of if you're mevatlen, that is if you're like here or not anymore. It's not true. Because you could say, according to Rabbi Eliezer, that a house without a chatzar, a person wouldn't live like that. So when you mevat your rights in the chatzar, you're like mevat the rights in your bayis. But you're not totally removed as if you're like in another courtyard. It's just that you don't have your rights in your house. But who said like another chatzar could be your life over here, and therefore, yeah, you would be able to mevat. And Shmuel would tell you, I could even be like Rabbanan, because what you were not mavatal, you were not mavatal. And therefore, you get to keep your rights in the house, and therefore no one can carry from your house or out of your house on Shabbos, even though you mavatal your rights in the chutzner. But what you were mavatal, you mavatal totally. And therefore, you're not in the chutzner at all, and you're like a ben chutzah acheres. And therefore, you cannot mavatal, v'chaytin mavatal. And so too, it's not necessarily the machlekes that remain Rabbi Yehuda regarding when someone gives his rights, and then he goes and he carries out by mistake, which is that taking back his rights or not? Well, that would similarly depend if you were like over here. If you're like a member of the neighborhood, so then going back and even by mistake is taking it back. If you're not, it wouldn't be. Well, that's machlekes Rav and Shmuel. If you're machlekes mavatim, if like you're like in the neighborhood or not. If you're like ben chatzah acheres, you're not. If you are, then you could. It says no. You could say that according to everyone, they were like Shmuel that no, you cannot be chayz mavatim because you're like masulik. You're not here anymore, which is like Shmuel. So then why would there be an opinion that if you by mistake went and carried out into your chutzner that like you're taking it back, but you're not even like here? The reason is just simply if we, kansu is the word of the Gemara, like Taisa says, if we're chayshish, for the case, let's show you the amazing. When you do it deliberately, everyone would agree, as Rashi explains, that you're going to take it back, even though you like live in another chutzner. Because you didn't sell your rights, you mavatal your rights. You come back and say, I want it back, you got it back. Shaygig is like, okay, but you by mistake you're carrying out, you don't even live over here. That's the case, not because of chayzim mavatim, because like you live over here. No, it's simply because we consider them shaygig with the nason. And however, there are those whoever says that no, it is that machlekes tanoim, and therefore that is the same machlekes of Rav and Shmuel. We went back to explain the halacha of the Mishnah. The Gamliel says a story with the Tzeduki regarding he was mavatal his rights and what his father told him. So the Gemara ultimately explained that it is a machlekes. If Tzeduki is like a nachri, and that's what the Tanakh would hold, and therefore he cannot mavatal his rights in his rishos. And that's what the story of Gamliel was coming to say. That's not true. He's not like a nachri, and he couldn't mavatal his rights, and never go ahead and be machzik and then quickly before he goes. And it's just that he can be chayzer, and he could be chayzer on that. But chaperayim, because his bittul does work, he is like a yisrael, he's not like a nachri. And then we brought another version of Gamliel, which we're going to explain more on the next daf, Rabbi Yehuda, which sounds like that Gamliel agrees that the Tzeduki cannot be mavatal, and therefore he says, do what you got to do before Shabbos, because once Shabbos starts, it's not going to help, because you didn't rent the rights. All you do was mavatal, and he's not like Yisrael to be mavatal his rights. Thank you to any time for hosting us.